I don't think the world's in a confused place right now. I think the world, people are confused, but the world is not. I wrote an article, and you can find it on Newsbreak and Substack and different places where I put it out there. But I wrote an article, about how America is confused. I really think we are a confused society right now. We used to be, as Reagan called it, that he borrowed that quote, a shining city on a hill. I think we went from being that to being just kind of like the drunk and confused guy with a lot of money and a lot of privilege who's now just kind of wandering the streets trying to say, I'm somebody. And I think that's okay. I think that's, a lot of people look at this and they think, this is okay. America is the great experiment, right? America is the really great experiment. And for an experiment to evolve, it has to go through growing pains, right? It has to go through trials and tribulations. It has to go through hardships. It has to go through changes. That's the scientific process, right? And, America is kind of the great scientific process of the world, right? No matter how you look at it. And you can get into all the deep history and the deep philosophy and all the deep kind of magnetics behind it. We're not America the crazy. We're America the evolving. And right now I think we're just in a new evolution of this experiment. I mean, you saw this all throughout history, right? I mean, you saw the Great Depression, you saw the World War II, you saw the Vietnam era and the Korean War, and you saw, Reaganomics when I come along in the 80s. Then you saw the Clinton years, and 9/11 and post 9/11, and then to the Obama administration and Trump, Biden, Trump. You see these different generations. Every time these generations evolve, we see things happen, and I don't think it's any reason to panic. But I think it's just, you have to wait and see where the evidence takes you, where this river takes you, and that's the scientific process of American politics. When you start looking at America less as one big country, one unified country, right? And you apply this lens of it like we're more like the European Union, 50 little countries, right, with a few shared common strains together. When you begin comparing the United States more to the EU, it makes a lot of sense. Instead of trying to think of us like one big country, right, like say, Russia or China or something like that, right? Cultures are definitely different regionally, right? But throughout this whole thing, the United States is more like, we're kind of like the original EU, right? We're the OG EU, if you will. It's not a terrible thing. It's not a terrible thing at all that we have these discussions, because you know what? I think for all the noise that's out there right now from both political sides, the left and the right and the in-between, really, there's still a lot of room for scholarly conversation. There's a lot of room for adult conversation. There's a lot of room for new ideas to come into play, and those ideas really do breed a new evolution of society. So yeah, I think right now, when people tell me that they're concerned with America, sure, maybe you have a right to be concerned with it if you're on one side or the other. But it's an evolution. Strangely enough, evolution is a word that most Americans don't generally like. They associate that with Darwin, and especially on the right-wing side. Evolution is not something that they really care to acknowledge too much, or a theory. But it's true, processes evolve. Evolution itself, at the root of it, is not a bad word. Evolution is a necessary process. If you take Darwinism and all this stuff completely out of it, and you look at how humans evolved, let's just say life started at Adam and Eve, right? Humans have evolved from wearing fig leaves and being naked in the garden, to flying spaceships. That's an evolution. I look at this, computers are an evolution. AI is an evolution. Everything is an evolution. So if you look at this through the complete lens of evolution as what it is truly at its core in the word, I believe you begin to make a lot more sense of America today. I don't know where this thing goes. I have no clue. I don't think with any scientist and anybody with a scientific mind, you really know where this thing is going to go. You have no idea where this thing is going to lead. And that's okay. You just kind of learn you learn the rules, right? The very basic rules of science. And you just kind of move along with it. And you just kind of let it go. And you just kind of follow it. And I think that's where we're at in America today, is we're just following along with knowing. Very few people actually know the basic rules of government. But more and more people, I think, are trying to interpret the rules of government. I think once you understand the basic rules, you have a very much better picture of where this thing is going. You may not know the outcome, but I think you can begin to predict with some certainty what is going to happen, what's not going to happen, what changes to expect, stuff like that, for sure. It's an interesting time to be alive, I'll tell you. And I think if you take this idea and you look at the global thing as a whole, there's a big chunk of Americans right now who don't believe in globalization. Globalization is a big thing. Globalization is a huge part. The global economy feeds local economies. The micro and the macro have to work together. And there's no getting around that. I think these chips have been a good example of that. Trade has been a good example of that. It's not, sure, it sounds all good and great, to be, this nation first, that nation first, whatever. It sounds all good and great, but I think one thing we've proven is that in this modern evolution of the world, nationalism is good, national pride is good, but cooperation is even better, and its cooperation is a necessity. I think there's this idea that you have to kill the competition, right? This is one thing that I'm seeing here today. You don't just defeat the competition, you have to absolutely obliterate the competition. And a lot of that, I think, comes to college football, It's really interesting because I'm a college football fan. I don't really follow the NFL much, but I follow college football quite a bit. And the rankings, a lot of that are based on how bad you defeat the other team, right? Your opponents throughout the year. And that's an interesting concept, because now we live in a world where, people think they have to absolutely 100% defeat their enemy. And they have to not just defeat them, but defeat them good. Just remember, with justice comes mercy. And those two things have to be in balance. So I don't know, the evolution of America, that's an interesting question. And I think we just follow the scientific process and we let it see, especially from a social science perspective.